Welcome to the NWI.com Political Roundtable for Thursday, June 23rd. I'm Times Assistant Managing Editor Robert Blaszkiewicz. Here with me today, Times Editorial Page Editor Doug Ross and Times columnist Mark Kiesling. We're going to tackle a few topics today, the first being something that just happened today, which was the announcement of a big new company coming to Portage, an Austrian company, Fronius, that manufactures solar power components. They are promising upwards of 500 jobs, so it's a pretty big coup for Portage and for the state, isn't it, Doug?
Right, and these are permanent jobs. We're not talking construction because the plant that they're moving into, basically the building's already there.
Yeah, the building, it's a building that exists in Ameriplex, the industrial park right there off of I-94.
What's interesting about this, I think, is that, $9 million
Right.
worth of federal stimulus money was used to buy equipment for this plant. And as we know, our Republican governor is opposed to the stimulus spending. So, here's an example of where it apparently worked.
Mark, money well spent?
Don't know. I think we're going to have to wait and see. I'm not familiar with Fronius. It's it's a company that is coming in from outside the United States. This is going to be their United States headquarters. I certainly wish them well, and I hope that in 10 years they're there and they've gone up to 2,000 workers. I think that would be money well spent. That said, as our resident panel skeptic, $9.5 million in OPM, other people's money, was basically given to Fronius, and they were also given, if I'm not mistaken, tax breaks. So they've had a lot of incentive to come in here and do this. When the tax breaks run out, and when the stimulus money has been spent to buy whatever has to be bought, I just hope that the commitment is there, that they will stay in Portage, and that they will continue to commit some of their own money to Portage, in order to keep this business functioning and keep people employed.
Right.
And I'm also hopeful, and I don't know what kind of jobs they are. I'm also hopeful these are a little bit beyond the $7.25 jobs that are minimum wage. So I hope we're going to see some. We could see some real economic development out of this. Keeping my fingers crossed. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
And this is a critical industry for Northwest Indiana.
Yeah, it's an emerging industry, obviously. I would think we would see more and more solar power as the years go by, so hopefully it's here to stay. Next topic we wanted to talk about, something we've talked about in the past few weeks, is the Little Calumet River levee issue and the debate about how those levees are going to be maintained and administered. There seems to be some retreat this week from a plan being pushed by County Surveyor George Van Til. Talk about that.
Sure. There have been a number of developments this week, actually. The big one is that the plan was being pushed by two big names, not only Van Til, but Hammond Mayor and Lake County Democratic Chairman, for that matter, Tom McDermott Jr. McDermott pulled his support for it, which is
McDermott
pretty major.
McDermott wasn't stumping for this like Van Til was. Van Til was going from city to city, town to town, trying to sell this project. He was kind of an evangelist for this project. McDermott was pushing it hard inside Hammond, and had gotten Councilman Michael Pinker to sponsor an ordinance that would have supported this bill. This week, not only did McDermott withdraw his support, but Pinker withdrew his support. And in talking to McDermott, he just told me, he said, "Look, how much abuse or how much of a beating am I supposed to take? Because it's outside of Hammond and Gary, it's been a rather unpopular thing."
There seems to be a lot of skepticism about creating this extra layer of government here with this.
Well, there's been some half-truths and some downright non-truths out there about it. There are going to be 50 each. What it would do is create a 9-member district. Each of the members is going to get $50,000 a year.
Which is malarkey.
Which is, well, it's baloney. They're going to get at most $50 a meeting, which doesn't even cover the cost of the gas to get there. They're all going to get cars. That's baloney too.
Mm.
They're all going to get cell phones. They're all going to get credit cards, which they'll then use to go to Las Vegas or whatever. None of that's true, but that's the kind of thing that's being spread throughout South County, and people are believing it.
Mm-hmm.
And given the history of Lake County, it's really hard for them not to believe it.
Doug, you did a video yesterday
Right.
that people can visit on the site.
Sure, absolutely. Dan Repay and I sat out actually right by the river with the Northcott Bridge behind us. And that's one of the bridges that really needs to be replaced because the deck of the bridge is below the height of the levee, so you can see where that's headed, or where the water would be headed in that case. So I invited Van Til to participate in that video, and he declined. So,
Okay. All right.
Frankly, I think he's tired of fighting. I think he sees this as his little bighorn, and he's just said, if this is where it's going, then I'm tired of fighting. And now it should also be noted that this was not a George Van Til drawn up plan. That the engineering plan for this was actually drawn up by a FEMA engineer. So it was Van Til pushing the plan, not something that he himself developed.
Our final topic this week, we wanted to discuss the issue of residency and public officials. We've seen it come up in a couple places in the town of Winfield with the council member who no longer lives in Winfield, and in the state capitol where our Secretary of State, Charlie White, is facing his own legal battle over residency.
right, and the Winfield situation is Councilman Michael DeNormandy, who was evicted from his home by a fellow councilman. If you want odd, okay, there you go. It's right there, and that was about 5 months ago. It was late January, and DeNormandy has stopped coming to meetings, still getting the money, and so you ask, okay, so what's that do in relationship to the Secretary of State? Well, Charlie White, the Secretary of State, was up before the Indiana Recount Commission, which was trying to decide was White eligible to run for office, and that is to be adjudicated before the trial. The felony charges are to be heard against Normandy, or against White, rather.
Right.
The curious thing about that is what he had in common was not only what he had in common with Normandy was that White drew a paycheck and from the Fishers town council,
Town of Fishers, yeah.
and when he was no longer able to serve, it was a nasty divorce, and that caused that to come about. He no longer lived with his ex-wife.
Right,
So.
and his defense was kind of interesting. He basically said that his defense was while he was running for office as Secretary of State, he was a homeless man. That was his defense, that he was basically living out of his car.
If he'd parked his car in Fishers, how would he that's a good question. Or if he had a P.O. box in Fishers,
Yeah.
and he was actually living out of his car. I mean, there's so many different there's so many different things you can look at here, and I think there are a lot of things you can look at in the DeNormandy case too. I'd like to know a bit about how DeNormandy. The one thing that troubles me about DeNormandy is that he has not been to meetings.
Yes.
If you care about your community, you go to the meetings.
Right.
I don't care where you're living. If you're able to pick up the paycheck,
If you're drawing a paycheck,
you're
right.
able to go to you're able to go to the meetings. And yet, I'd like to know a bit about some of the background behind what happened to him, how much flexibility was given to him. Look, you've got to be back in town by March 1st. Okay, I'm not very draconian on this. I think there's a letter of the law and a spirit of the law, and I think most reasonable people would give a person some leeway. They wouldn't say, okay, your lease expired on January 31st, on February 1st, you've got to be out. I don't think most reasonable people would see it that way. I think most Americans would see it as saying, all right, let's give this guy a chance. Let's give him a month, see what he can do. As long as he's going to the meetings, as long as he's showing up and doing his job. If he can't get his act together in a month, then he's got to, and he's got to go. But that's
Well, I think the legislature is going to have to spell out, what exactly does residency mean? Is it where you park your car? Is it where you park your carcass?
that whole thing has been up in the air everywhere. I mean, in Chicago, for example, all Chicago public employees are required to be residents of the city.
But that's public employees. This is a public official.
Right.
So it's
But-
different.
Well, it's different, and yet it's the same. You're asking the question of residency. I'm not talking about residency for, I'm not talking your job. I'm talking the question of residency. What is residency? Not what your job is. If you're required to be a resident in order to do your job, be it a city councilman, be it a policeman, be it a fireman, what is residency? And that's what I think. That's why I think you've been mistaken.
The Indiana Recount Commission will be hopefully ruling on that soon. So
Well, yeah, it said, I think June 30th.
So we'll see how that develops, and we'll bring you obviously those developments and all the rest of the world of politics in next week in our political roundtable. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.